This episode is sponsored by Free Market Kids.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Unchatter. Today, you're listening to part 4 of my conversation with Toshi.
Also where I think Bitcoin can come in, right? Because of course we have a lot of women who do not have bank accounts and who do not have access to getting a bank account. Now Bitcoin can come in solving this problem. With Bitcoin, they don't need to go get a bank account because they can easily with the comfort of their home, comfort of their phones, make their transaction, receive money, send out money without having to necessarily get a bank account, and it's going to be a good plus for housewives and women in the rural areas who still have their finances controlled by the men in their lives. So yeah, and then the good thing here is Bitcoin has kept advancing, and there's been like good solutions in the Bitcoin space. Example, it's Machankura, right? Machankura was designed such that people in Africa who do not have access to the internet would not be left out on Bitcoin. So people in the rural areas who do not have bank accounts or who, their banks is quite far from their location, they don't have to worry about getting a bank account or traveling a far distance to be able to go to the bank and get a bank account. But with their smartphones, right, they can have their make their Bitcoin transactions, receive money through a short code, the USSD short code using Machankura. Now, you don't need to have an internet access, you don't need to have a smartphone to be able to have a Bitcoin wallet or to be able to use to send and receive Bitcoin. That's the solution Machankura has introduced to the African space, and I think the more people know about Machankura, especially in the rural parts of Africa, the more people know about Machankura, the faster we get to the point of adoption, where because people would have less need for fiat. People would have less need to go to the bank. And I think this would be like a good point for mass adoption of Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is going to carry everybody along. There's going to be like a huge financial inclusion for women when it comes to finances. At this point, they don't need to declare their finances to their husband because of course they have their Bitcoin address and it's just to them. It's unique to them. So, it just helps them get in control of their money and, basically create that financial inclusion and financial freedom that women want in Africa.
How do you see more women getting on board with Bitcoin affect Nigeria going forward? Like, if you were to project out in your imagination 10, 20 years, let's say 20 years, and let's say you and I, and all the other women and other Bitcoiners are successful in onboarding many, many, many more women than we have today. How do you see that changing the state of things in Nigeria? Just in your imagination.
Okay, so Nigerians are very entrepreneurial in spirit. There are a lot of Nigerians I know who like to create things, who want to sell things, and like they say, the world is a global village, right? But then I tell people how much of a global village is this if people in Africa cannot easily and conveniently do business with people outside of Africa or even within Africa but different countries. But I think Bitcoin is going to solve that problem. It's going to make the world an actual global village because we can easily interact with ourselves and interact with our finances conveniently. Now, how is it going to affect the economy? It's simple. The more people get in business, start creating things, buying and selling, there would be a lot of the amount or the level of export in Nigeria, for instance, would increase. Now, there's a lot of policies and there's a whole lot of discouraging factors limiting people from having cross-border transactions. A whole lot there, like unfavorable export policies, unfavorable international transaction fees, and all of that. So, but with Bitcoin in the space, it would be easier for me to sell my products outside of Nigeria and still receive payments. Now, the more money we are bringing into the Nigerian economy, the better the economy because once there's a good level of import and export, it sort of like helps with the balance of payment in Nigeria, and by extension, it will increase the standard of living and the GDP of Nigeria and all of that. So I think that there's going to be a significant change when Bitcoin is fully integrated into the payment system of Nigeria. But then, there's still something about control. The government would also want to have like that sense of control about money, and Bitcoin doesn't give them that control. So it's still going to be like a bit of a hurdle for the government and the people. But I believe that eventually, with time, we will get to that point of hyper Bitcoinization where the government would have no choice than to fully embrace this technology.
Yeah, that's such a great vision, and we all strive to help bring the Bitcoin to that point, right? Do you have any suggestions for women who are sitting on the fence about Bitcoin and still unsure about participating?
Okay, so I was speaking to someone who happens to be one of the founder and CEO of one of the big Bitcoin companies in Nigeria. And he said, you don't need to struggle so hard to convince people to see the potential of Bitcoin. We would always have a problem that Bitcoin can solve, right? So they should just be on the fence, but that's fine. There would definitely be a problem, and that would make them see that, oh yeah, Bitcoin is actually the solution. And they themselves would come down from that fence and embrace Bitcoin. Because when there's a problem, you wouldn't need anybody to handhold you. You would stand up and go out there looking for a solution yourself. So, but I'll still say this, Bitcoin has a potential to improve the standard of living that we have in Nigeria and better the economy. So if you're still on the fence, well, you get there. We will get there.
I love that. That is so true. Sometimes, it's like when I say when the stars are aligned, you'll be led toward the rabbit hole. We're just trying to light a path so that when the stars do align, they would just see it, right? So true that when you have a problem, you have no choice. You hop off the fence and you walk toward, and the more you learn about Bitcoin, the more excited you're gonna get. Just like every other Bitcoiner who has gone through that initial sort of transformation phase. You're like, what? This whole thing is available? What? I just want to thank you so much for sharing your stories with us and your wisdom and your experiences. I think that it's so helpful for us to understand what different monetary systems in different stages are sort of forcing their people to experience, right? So for the people who are outside Africa or outside Nigeria, it's so helpful to hear your story and understand from your point of view why Bitcoin is so important. So I want to thank you for coming on the show and sharing your experiences. Any last recommendations, resources you want people to go to, anything to wrap up?
Oh yeah, what I usually tell people is, especially people who are trying to get into the space, the first thing you need to do is get acquainted with people who are already in the space. We have lots of them on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Instagram. Just connect with them and just read their thoughts, listen to their thoughts, and try to understand what they already know. And then gradually you'll find yourself getting into the space deeper. And the beautiful thing is, I see that the Bitcoin community is like a big global family. Everybody is super supportive, really, really super supportive to each other, to everybody in the Bitcoin space. So I would say that if you're trying to get into the space, you're trying to understand Bitcoin, just get into the community, listen to people, and before you know it, of course, we would always welcome you with an open arms, and you feel welcome. And from there, you start learning, you start knowing about things, you start attending events and seminars, and from there, you start your orange peeling journey. So thank you very much, Tali, for having me on this talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Toshi. Thanks for joining us today and learning with us today. If the discussion with our guest resonated with you and you would like to dive deeper into the world of Bitcoin, don't miss out on joining the Orange Hatter Women's Reading Club. The meetup link is in the show notes. Also, if there are women in your life whom you think would both enjoy and benefit from learning more about Bitcoin, please share Orange Hatter with them. Until next time, bye!
This episode is sponsored by Free Market Kids.